Hi, everyone. So I told you after I finished the book of Romans, I was going to start going through the book of Daniel. So here we are. I uploaded 2 videos finishing out the book of Romans earlier this morning, and now we are going to get into the book of Daniel. This very first chapter is fascinating in the number of links that it has to the end times and to the book of Revelation. Now, in studying the 7 letters to the 7 churches, we find in Smyrna, the second of the 7 in Revelation 2, that there is a reference to ye shall have tribulation 10 days. Now, this baseline understanding for the word tribulation in the book of Revelation is established in Revelation 1. In Revelation 1:9, where John, when he is exiled to the Isle of Patmos, says that he is a brother and companion in tribulation. So this is the general sense of the word that we take from our understanding from Jesus's words in John 16. He says, what does he say specifically in John 16:33? He says, to express the importance of understanding that this is a general situation, these things I have spoken unto you, that in me, sorry, I'm getting mail delivered, in me, ye might have peace. In the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. So to help us understand this end times revelation of Jesus Christ given to John when he's in the Isle of Patmos, we have this baseline understanding of terms given in Revelation 1 at the very beginning, where just like Jesus described it in John 16, John is also describing it as a general condition. I, John, who also am your brother and companion in tribulation and in the kingdom and patience of Jesus Christ, was in the isle that is called Patmos for the word of God and for the testimony of Jesus Christ. So we have this baseline established in Revelation 1. So when we next encounter the word tribulation in Revelation, it's in chapter 2 in the letter to the church of Smyrna. And he says in Revelation 2:10, fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison, that ye may be tried, and ye shall have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life. So, sorry, apparently I'm too popular right now. Hi, Daniel. Welcome. So, this general condition that was already described in Revelation 1. Let's just turn my phone down. Sorry. This general condition that was already described by John in Revelation 1 is picked up again in Revelation 2 with Jesus's words to the second of the 7 churches mentioned, the church of Smyrna. So we look for links in the Bible to this tribulation general circumstance for 10 days. And wouldn't you know that the vast majority of the imagery in the book of Revelation goes back to the Old Testament, which it would, because Revelation is a book of prophecy given specifically to the people who will be going through that time period, which are namely who? The Jews. So the imagery in Revelation is going to dovetail very heavily off of existing imagery given in the Old Testament, specifically to help the people who would need to understand it, who are the Jews to whom the Old Testament was given, understand the prophecy of the end times. We find the link to this general tribulation 10 days in the book of Daniel, specifically in chapter 1. And what this story relates to is that there is a period of testing, a period of trial through which God assists. And at the end of this period of testing, of trial, there is a reward given for faithfulness. In the letter to the church of Smyrna, this could be up to and including death, because it does talk about martyrdom. Be thou faithful through this period of trial testing, and there will be a reward given for said faithfulness at the end of it. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life. In the original story, which comes from the book of Daniel, chapter 1, it was the testing or the trying of these Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. We know them as Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel. So they were tried for a period of 10 days, that what they asked to be given would leave them in a better condition than what the king wanted to give them. They were tried or tested for 10 days. At the end of that period, they had faith that God would come out victorious at the end of that his will would be done, and demonstrated they would be rewarded for their faithfulness toward him. And they were given, Daniel specifically was given a place of elevated importance. So this is where the story comes from in the letter of the church of Smyrna, is that be thou faithful, and thou shalt have tribulation 10 days. It's a period of testing through which faith is demonstrated. And at the end of that, there is a reward given for that faithfulness. So let's actually go to the book of Daniel, and we'll start with this story. And then I'll get into the other links, because there is a link to End Times Babylon, because where's Daniel even at when he's writing this book? He's in Babylon. And we're going to, as we go through this, we're going to learn about the statue of Nebuchadnezzar's statue in Daniel 2. We're going to learn about the kingdoms, the 3 that have already come, the 4th one that ties to the book of Revelation also. And we need to understand how Ezekiel's end times vision of his temple ties into the book of Daniel. So we're going to go through all of those things in this video. The book of Daniel is ripe with importance about the end times and imagery and the baseline knowledge that we get to take into our study of the book of Revelation. So let's go through this 10 days thing first, so that you can see how the letter to the church of Smyrna is actually referring to Daniel 1's story of this period of 10 days. And at the end of that, a reward is given for faithfulness demonstrated through the trial. The 10 days is a specific reference to the story in Daniel 1, where the period of testing was 10 days. So let's start with this. And this is Daniel 1:1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. This we will come back to, because this ties into Ezekiel's vision, his temple vision from Ezekiel 40. So we'll come back to that. So hang on for a little bit. The Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar. Babylon, we'll come back to this also, to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. The king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princes, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored. So he was selecting the best of the best for his purpose. And skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge, and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. The king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat, and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. So his goal here was to select the best of the best from Israel, so they could eventually stand in the king's court and represent Babylon. In so raising them up to be the best of the best, he was going to feed them and nourish them with the best of the best, which was the king's meat and the king's wine. However, among the people that they selected as the best of the best from Israel during this Babylonian captivity, because that's where they're in, and again, we're going to come back to that, he selected 4 people who were like, we don't want that, we'd prefer this instead. So this was actually going to cause an issue to where the appointee of the king was basically like, you are asking me to stick my neck out for you and go against the king, and like, I might die if after 10 days you're found to be worse off than when you started. Daniel's like, trust us. Now among these were of the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And again, we know them as Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names, for he unto Daniel the name Belshazzar, and to Hananiah of Shadrach, to Mishael of Meshach, and to Azariah of Abednego. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Okay, so we have a little bit of a sticky issue here. Now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. The prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your meat and your drink. For why should he see your faces worse, liking than the children which are of your sort? Then shall you make me endanger my head to the king. Then said Daniel to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, prove thy servants. Set us through this period of trying, of testing. Prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days. This is the link to the letter of the church of Smyrna, that there is this specific period of testing, of trying for 10 days. Demonstrate faith through it. At the end, you're going to be rewarded for your faith through this period of testing. So he says, prove, test us, try us, 10 days. And let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. Then let our countenances be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat the portion of the king's meat. And as thou seest, deal with thy servants. So do this for us, and we'll prove to you that we're going to be better off trusting our Lord than trusting your king. So he consented to them in this matter and proved them 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. Thus Melzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine that they should drink, and gave them pulse. So thou shalt have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful through this period of time, and you're going to be rewarded at the end of it. In the letter to the church of Smyrna, she'll give thee a crown of life for faithfulness. So here is the reference here, is they were proved that 10 days. And at the end of that, they were better off than the rest of them who had the king's meat and the king's wine. So the prince of the eunuchs took away the king's meat and the king's wine, and he gave all of them the same thing that Daniel was eating, because Daniel was better off at the end of that time. So what was the reward that Daniel got for his faithfulness during this period of 10 days, this period of trying and testing? As for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all dreams and visions. Now, at the end of the days that the king had said he should bring them in, then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. The king communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king. And in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm. And Daniel continued even unto the first year of King Cyrus. So that is specifically what the reference in the letter to the church of Smyrna is in Revelation 2, is that period of 10 days. It refers you back to Daniel 1 for a specific instance of a period of trying or proving or testing for 10 days, through which perfect faith was demonstrated. And at the end, there was a massive reward given for said demonstration of faith. So that is where that comes from. So that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about. The second one I want to talk about is actually the reference to Babylon, as it will reappear in the end times in Revelation. The book of Daniel is written in Babylon, amidst the Babylonian captivity. We learned this from the first couple of verses. Hi, Dan. Hi, good servant. Welcome to you both. So it says, in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. So this is going to tie us into the book of Ezekiel also. Ezekiel's temple and times vision from Ezekiel 40. Because when Ezekiel gets his vision, we are given 4 different years that we need to pinpoint out. He's referring to 2 different data points respective to the Babylonian captivity, the second of which correlates directly to Daniel 1, 1, and 2, which was the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah. Nebuchadnezzar came to Babylon unto Jerusalem and besieged it. This was the third of 3 exiles in the Babylonian captivity. Now, if you recall from me having talked about Daniel 9, if you guys have heard me talk about it, you know that we are told in the first verses of Daniel 9 that he understood Jeremiah's prophecy, which comes from, I believe, Jeremiah 25:11. Let's look. Jeremiah 25:11. And the whole land shall be a desolation and an astonishment, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. That is the prophecy of the 70 years of captivity, comes from Jeremiah 25:11. Daniel understood that they were at the end of Jeremiah's prophesied 70 years when he received his vision of the 70 weeks. Now, it's important to understand, though, for other biblical reference points, that there were 3 exiles of this 70-year Babylonian captivity. From the beginning of the first exile all the way to the year after Daniel's vision was 70 years. The third exile of the Babylonian captivity is one of the data points in Ezekiel's vision. It was when Jerusalem was sacked and destroyed. Solomon's temple was destroyed. It was burned in the sacking of Jerusalem circa 586 BC. So when we go to Ezekiel's vision in Ezekiel 40, we learn that Daniel 1 and Ezekiel 40 are tied together by these Babylonian captivity dates and activities. Ezekiel 40 verse 1, in the 25th year of our captivity. So there's 3 exiles of the Babylonian captivity. 25 years after one of the exiles is the year that Ezekiel is in when he's receiving this vision. That year that he is in, that is 25 years after one of the exiles, is also 14 years after that the city was smitten. The city was smitten in Daniel 1:1 in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, in the final exile of the Babylonian captivity, when Daniel and a lot of them got carted off captive to Babylon. So these are tied together. So Ezekiel has 4 years in view in his vision to pinpoint him to an event that he's prophesying about. In the 25th year of our captivity, so this is actually, when you plot it out, he's talking about the second exile of the Babylonian captivity is 25 years after that point. In the 10th day of the month, in the 25th year of our captivity, so he's 25 years after this, what would be the second exile of the Babylonian captivity. In the beginning of the year, in the 10th day of the month, Nisan 10, in the 14th year after that, the city was smitten. So the year that Ezekiel is in is a Jubilee year when you plot this all out. He's in Nisan 10 of a Jubilee year, which is 14 years after the 3rd exile of the Babylonian captivity, also 25 years after the 2nd exile of the Babylonian captivity, prophesying about what will happen on Nisan 10 in the same type of year, Jubilee year, in the future, which is the measuring for his temple, which Daniel will prophesy about as the strength behind covenant confirmation when we get to Daniel 9. So that is how Ezekiel's vision ties into Daniel 1, because they're prophesying about the same events during the same time periods. Ezekiel was prophesying circa Nisan 10, 573 BC. Daniel was prophesying circa 537 BC, so inversely related, in Daniel 9 when he receives his 70 weeks vision. 538, because 537 was when the second temple began to be built, which was what he was praying for them to be able to go back to Israel after the Babylonian captivity and rebuild, was the temple, because it was destroyed here in Daniel 1. So in the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. They destroyed Jerusalem and they burned Solomon's temple. And this was the third of 3 exiles of the Babylonian captivity. All of the children of Israel got carted away captive per Jeremiah's prophecy in Jeremiah 25:11. The Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand. This was the end of the reign of the Judaic kings, the house of Judah. The next Judaic king will be Jesus when he sits on the throne of David in the millennial kingdom. The Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar. And this is the third thing I wanted to talk about in this video, was the land of Shinar, the reference to Babylon and Revelation. There are obviously prophecies in the book of Revelation about Babylon. When the plain text makes perfect sense, seek no other sense. We also have Zechariah to tell us that wickedness, the woman who is the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth, so described in Revelation 17. So she is the embodiment of wickedness. That wickedness will be carted off and established upon its own base in the land of Shinar in the end times, Zechariah 5. Zechariah 5:5, relating to Revelation 17 and 18. Then the angel that talked with me went forth and said unto me, Lift up now thine eyes and see what it is that goeth forth. And I said, What is it? He said, This is an ephah that goeth forth. He said, Moreover, this is their resemblance through all the earth. Behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead. This is a woman that sitteth in the midst of the ephah. What is one of the women that is described in the book of Revelation? The harlot, the woman that rides the beast. He says, This is wickedness, the mother of harlots, the abominations of the earth. He cast it into the midst of the ephah, and he cast the weight of lead upon the mouth thereof. Then lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, there came out 2 women, and the wind was in their wings, for they had wings like the wings of a stork. They lifted up the ephah between the earth and the heaven. Then said I to the angel that talked with me, Whither do these bear the ephah? Where are they taken the woman who embodies wickedness? And he said unto me, To build it an house in the land of Shinar, and it shall be established and set there upon her own base. So the original base of wickedness, which the woman embodies, relates to Shinar. Where does this come from the Old Testament? The base of a wickedness described about Shinar. Genesis 10. Genesis 10:8. And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter. He hunted righteous men. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it said, Even Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel and Erech and Akkad and Calneh in the land of Shinar, where the Tower of Babel was built. That they tried to build up into heaven to overthrow God, and God said no. The original one world, everything, wickedness, established upon its own base in the land of Shinar, goes back to Babel, where Nimrod built the tower to try to reach up into heaven and overthrow God. That is literally what will be reinstituted in the end times to try to do the same against Jesus when he returns at the second coming. Babylon will be destroyed just before he returns, and then they're going to gather to try to overthrow him at the second coming and will be unsuccessful. But there is no reason why we should suspect that Babylon means anything other than Babylon, where wickedness was established upon its base originally and will be reestablished per Zechariah 5 upon its own base in the land of Shinar. Moreover, we know specifically that Shinar is attributed to Babylon because Daniel tells us it is. In Daniel 1:1-3. In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with part of the vessels of the house of God, Solomon's temple, which they burned to the ground, which he carried into the land of Shinar. to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. So these are the links that we understand of the end times from the book of Daniel. We have three things that we're going to learn about from Daniel 1, or that we do learn about from Daniel 1, that relate specifically to the end times. And that, well, to the book of Revelation, I guess, more specifically, and that is the trying 10 days, demonstration of faith, and a reward at the end of that for having demonstrated said faith. The 10 days comes from the story in Daniel 1 relative to the letter to the church of Smyrna. We also learn about Ezekiel's vision. We will learn more about that. We'll talk more about that as we go through the book of Daniel. But Ezekiel 40, which pinpoints Daniel to Nisan 10 of a Jubilee year, prophesying about what will happen on the same day in the same type of year in the future, which is the measuring for his temple, which is the strength behind Daniel 9's covenant confirmation. We will definitely discuss more about that as we go. And then we have specifically and certainly the link to Revelation 17 and 18's Babylon, per understanding where Daniel was when he's prophesying about all of these things, which will include in chapters to come the beast, the 10 kings, the fourth kingdom from Revelation. There's a whole lot of imagery that Daniel is going to explain that will correlate to the book of Revelation. So here we go. We're getting started. As always, if you have questions or feedback, comments, anything like that, if there is anything that you would like me specifically to discuss, then please leave it in comments and I will definitely do my best to get to it. So thanks, and I'll see you guys later.